The word coach comes from the Hungarian word koski, meaning a carriage or a wagon. It entered English in the 1500s as a term for a vehicle that carries people from one place to another. And that's what coaching is, helping people travel from where they're starting now to a new destination. And this episode explores how we actually support that journey. So Richard Barbour is the guest. He's got over 30 years experience in coaching across sport and in business. Richard is a snow sport coach, he's a coach developer and a coaching consultant. He's had so many roles across sport, snow sport in particular. He's head coach of the Gloucester Adaptive Skiing Centre and supports skiers with disability and has been involved in coach education pathways. Richard is also a creator of an award-nominated coaching podcast and contributes to coach development around the world. In our episode today, we talk about that coaching isn't necessarily about having all the answers, and it's about changing perspective, understanding how each person we work with experiences the world. Some of the key themes that come out of the conversation: perception shaping behaviour. The perception of the task determines the behaviour, Richard says. The power of the conversation, so better questions equals better awareness, and recognising the fact it's their world. And Richard's job, in his words, is to understand it. Why should you listen to this episode? Well, it will challenge you on how you think about designing practice, asking questions, and interpret the behaviour of the people that you coach. And it's a reminder that coaching is about noticing, listening, and understanding. There's lots in here to think about, so let's get into it. The next episode of the Game Plan Coaching Podcast with Richard Barbour. Now, the word coaching, Richard, comes from some primary influence around transport and to travel from one place to another. So when you've been on your journey traveling as a coach, what have been the things that have really influenced or impacted you?
Well, I think my first coach impacted me a lot, a guy called Jim Pello. He instilled sets of conduct almost, always turning up, always being there. He was also great from the point of view of helping me with early coach awards and being there with helping me rehearse the quite strict assessment criteria and things like that. And then as I've gone along, a very big influence on me has been my skiers, in particular skiers with disabilities that I've worked with over the years. They've taught me a heck of a lot about coaching. And also this guy, John Shedden, who has been an extremely influential coach within snow sports and beyond, along with his colleague at the time within the English Ski Council, a guy called Dennis Edwards. And they've had a big influence on how I've developed as a coach in terms of how I behave, the type of tasks I set, and no doubt some of the other things we'll discuss during the rest of the conversation. They are really, really influential. John has become a friend, having been originally someone who was really intimidating to meet because of his incredible breadth of knowledge and the work that he did across numerous Olympic sports as well as snow sports.
I'm curious because I came across something the other day talking about how roadblocks or disruption to coaches has a real impact on their learning and development. So by navigating a roadblock, you learn new things, you learn how to overcome challenge. And I wonder, from the time you've had in snow sport and other walks of life, have there been any moments where you've had to really overcome difficulty, which has taught you something new, either about yourself or the way that you coach?
I think there's a couple of examples I can give straight off. I've studied coaching separately within business as well. And doing that, an awful lot of that process is around the conversation. It's around curiosity, supporting people and using different tools that you select from your bank of tools to try and find something that's useful and appropriate and understandable for the person that you're working with, to help them firstly identify their situation and what it is, their goals, and how you're going to support them and help them forward. And the other is working with people with learning difficulties. Just this week, I was working remotely with the dad of a skier that I work with who was out with them in the mountains. And my coaching tool was this box of Smarties and some animations that I made. And actually that in itself has been just instructive this week, because he's been sending me videos we've been agreeing some tasks for him to attempt out in the mountainside, and you can see his reaction and how he perceives those tasks. And actually, that in itself is incredibly instructive, because I did an animation with these as aiming points for a Christmas decoration of all things. And then out in the mountain, his dad was using some of these as markers, and they were counting round the turns and so on. To various success. And every evening, his dad's messaging me, said, this worked, this didn't work so well, we hit this roadblock, and so on. So, I mean, I've numerous examples of working with skiers with disabilities where it's a different paradigm. You're trying to teach and coach the same activities, but people are receiving information in completely different ways and perceiving it in completely different ways to others. So they're big ones.
As working with people with disabilities, what's it brought to the surface for you? What's it sharpened in terms of your coaching skills?
It sharpened the understanding that everybody perceives the world in a different way. We perceive ourselves in a different way. We perceive the sensory feedback that we get in different ways. And actually, again, an example of that is a blind skier that I worked with. He had a little bit of light perception, and that was it, and had been blind from a young child. And I'm coaching him as a young adult. And his sensory awareness, what he could feel through his feet in particular, seemed hugely amplified compared with other people. Some sighted skiers that I've worked with, for instance, didn't give me the level of information he was giving back. And that was really, really powerful to use in terms of extracting that feedback from him and then getting him to shape his performance using that information. So it's really amplified that for me, plus also task setting. In the other example I've just given you, the sorts of tasks you can set to elicit the behavioural change that you're seeking to get with a performer.
You said the first out of these two approaches was using different tools, and that focus on the conversation and the relationship that you have with the person that you're coaching. Now, going back to the example of the skier who's got that kind of high level of sense within their feet, did you have to think differently about how you posed questions or set up tasks to be able to almost elicit back that information from them to help you know what they were experiencing?
Yeah, sure. But also just the level and clarity of information he was giving me actually made the process a lot easier, because you could just say, okay, that's great. So I'd now like you to notice that feeling for a bit longer and tell me what happens. And then feel it against the other foot a bit longer. And the answer come back, well, the shape of my turns is changing. I can feel I'm going across that way a bit more and back that way a bit more. Good. Okay. That was the idea.
I think the important point for me when I'm listening to you speak is that having that dialogue, that co-creative dialogue with the person that you're coaching, regardless if they're somebody with disabilities or kind of a member of the general population, to be able to be curious and not make presumptions about what they're feeling and experiencing, but really try and walk in their shoes or ask helpful questions is critical for a coach to be able to truly be alongside the person that they're working with.
I agree. And I mean, this is one of my key learnings from the people, my big influences I mentioned earlier, Dennis Edwards and John Shedden, was the work that they did creating a tool called the INTAT, or intention, attention, feedback loop, which very much draws on extracting that sensory information. During the performance, the skier is getting feedback all the time. They're receiving sensory information and processing that information and deciding what to do with it. And so that's incredibly powerful. If I think about my local artificial ski centre, the skiers are coming down and they're making somewhere between 10 and 20 turns. So there's 10 to 20 turns of information available to help shape their performance, and they can be attentive to an aspect of that performance whilst doing it. And the role of the feedback then is to be very specific and to extract that information from them to help calibrate it. Is what I sensed doing what was intended?
And that word there, sensed, as well, I think is such an important word. And as in a conversation with somebody recently where they were highlighting to me the shift from memory and almost committing something to memory and a change in language and an understanding to remembering. And this was Stuart Armstrong on another one of these podcasts. And he was making the point that by spending time in an environment, by being exposed to different tasks or pictures, if you like, in that environment, you become attuned to it over time. So you're not necessarily drawing a specific technique or skill from a part of your brain. You are sensing what is going on because you've seen and been exposed to this situation or similar situations before. And I just wanted to pick up on the word sensing because I think sometimes as a coach, that skill might be overlooked, and it definitely comes with expertise as well.
Oh, for sure. You know, a lot within my sport of snow sports, a lot of the history of the sport has what I call some baggage going with it. Very technique-based approaches to training ski instructors. What you should be looking to see in your performers is X, Y, and Z, these movement patterns. You absorb pressure by doing this, you turn by doing this, and so on. And I was exposed to some of those models early on in my career. And in order to pass the assessment, you had to show that you could make these movement patterns. But it created a whole group, a whole cohort of people that were wedded to a very specific model. And therefore, that is really influential on a technique-based approach to teaching or coaching the sport. Whereas a more task-based approach is more related to aspects of the sport, such as racing, where at the end of the day, you've got to get down as quickly as you can. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Whereas other aspects of our sport are very judged, and therefore it does matter what it looks like. And in between that, there are parts of our sport, such as mogul skiing, where part of it is timed and part of it is judged. Ski jumping, it's judged on distance and the quality of a telemark landing. And so within our sport, we've got to be open to actually being able to help people solve tasks as effectively and efficiently as possible. And sometimes they need to learn to do something in a set way because they want to go off and become a demonstrator at the International Ski Congress. But the role of tasks is hugely important for the speed sports, for the racing sports. At the end of the day, they're going to have a unique task put in front of them for one lasting 45 to 60 seconds that they've got to solve. So why wouldn't you expose people to tasks on that journey, and a huge variability of tasks as well?
Yeah, and shouldn't be reliant on the coach as the problem solver, more that the coach is the problem setter to be able to expose them to those experiences.
Yeah, and the person that's in dialogue with them about setting the next set of goals and helping them to profile where they're currently at and what their main development needs are, and therefore what would drive the training activity in, say, the off-season in preparation for the next winter season.
Richard, let's segue into a brief interlude and something new I'm trying on this second series of the podcast. Listeners have told us that they love the tangible ideas that come from the discussions with our brilliant guests. And we know that lots of coaches love to pick up and pinch ideas off others, maybe edit them slightly for their own environment. But the best coaches are the ones who can be a magpie and see something and bring it across sometimes. So I wonder, is there one thing another coach could steal from you today with no permission required?
Okay. Yep. It's the perception of the task determines the behaviour.
Go on, tell us a bit more.
Well, as you already know from the conversation so far, I'm a fan of tasks. And you may, as a coach and the performer, may have a development area that they have. It might be technical, it might be psychological, it might be strength and conditioning, whatever it may be. But say I'm sending someone off skiing down the hillside, whether it's at my local dry ski centre or out in the mountains. When you set a task, we all have a different perception of how to solve it. We all have different, we're all preloaded with different knowledge, experience and beliefs before we set off and do this thing. And so when I'm working with coaches that I'm mentoring, for instance, I'll often spend time on task setting and get them to observe how the skier is behaving. And the first question is, are the sorts of behaviours, their approach to that task, kind of what I was expecting or not? And sometimes it's completely different. My Smarty activity earlier this week, I was using those as aiming tasks. The skier would aim towards it and then deliberately spray snow and try and hide the cone and hide the Smartie and disappear off. Okay, so the game was eating the Smarties by burying them in snow. And when on this video I got sent through, some of them he does that and others he skis around them. And his perception of the task in the moment is, well, I'm going to ski around that one. I'm going to spray that one. I'm going to ski around that one, and so on. And perception is a huge subject area in itself. How people receive and process information and what meaning it gives to them is huge. So I'd say the perception of the task determines the behavior. If you're looking to change behavior, can you set tasks that create different behaviors?
I'm writing that down before I lose it from my short-term memory. People who are familiar with practice design principles may well be familiar with the relationship between task, environment, and the person. My reflection listening to you there is, well, how well you know the person will then have an impact on how they will perceive the task.
Yeah, absolutely.
And therefore, having that strong relationship of their goals and drivers and the resources they have available will shift the tasks that you design, or at least play a part in influencing the tasks that you design.
Yeah. And again, interestingly, part of the feedback, you mentioned environment there. Some of these tasks were set on a deliberately shallow terrain that was unthreatening, that the skier could rip along at and not feel at all threatened, and therefore pay attention to solving the task. It didn't always elicit the intended outcomes, either in the solution of the task or the kind of movement coordination that was hoped for to be developed. But the feedback I got from Dad was, when we went to this steeper terrain, which was actually more challenging, the behaviour occurred, and consistently. And there again, my perception of the coach of the task is changed. Okay, let's exploit that. Don't go back to that green run. Let's stick on that blue run. Go ripping round and enjoying that and do different turns. And if that's the behaviour that you're seeking and he's enjoying himself, what's not to like?
Excellent. Perception of the task determines the behaviour. I think that's a brilliant statement for coaches to reflect on, and how that then influences their practice and the tasks that they set. So as you know, Richard, within this podcast, in every episode, we ask every guest to make a unique contribution to our game plan, which is this growing and evolving shared playbook of ideas and stories, lessons that different guests add something to. And I think this game plan over time will potentially become useful for coaches, because it will provide lots of different perspectives and ideas around coaching practice and coaching environments and everything that sits around it. And with all of your oceans of experience in coaching, both in sport and other walks of life, I'm just really curious. What are you going to add into our game plan?
Well, the conversation. A lot of the conversation we've had so far is about eliciting feedback, information from the performer that they get whilst they're performing. And one of the areas to develop as a coach is how to get the most from that information, how to ask questions that bring that out, create the most power from that information. The skier's just come down and just arrived at you and has felt loads of things, sensed loads of things. What questions can you ask to help them gain real clarity about what it is they felt and the relationship to what they felt and the outcome? And it's something that I learned a lot through the business coaching work that I did, but I don't think it's exclusive to that. But models such as cognitive behavioral coaching, neuro-linguistic programming, in particular appreciative inquiry, conversational tools, coaching tools that are worth exploring. If you're doing some CPD, continuing professional development, why not take one of those and have a look at it and see what influence it might have on you? Those sort of tools for me have helped me gain real better insights, improved insights from what the skiers have just felt and come down. And it helps me calibrate my visual perception and my auditory perception of what I've just seen and heard, and how that can be best used.
How often do you find yourself planning questions or just responding to what's in front of you?
It tends to be fairly dynamic in my situation. I'm very reflective. So after a session, I'll be thinking about, what went well, what less well. I'll ask the performers too, what was good, what was boring, what should we do less of, and so on. So I'm quite reflective in that way. And I also do a thing called pre-reflection, which is looking back at my notes from the last session. What did go well? What are the areas for exploitation? And do I need to work on my questioning? And a particular area of that for me is, I mentioned earlier on about people coming along preloaded. When we go off and do anything, like, setting up for today, I was preloaded with information, perceptions, worries, thoughts about whether my equipment would work, the lighting, and so on. And, I brought that to this session, and all my skiers do. And they're preloaded with different amounts of those each time. And the questioning can really help focus attention. So I'd say, try and ask questions that really draw out and focus the attention on what the skier is really paying attention to.
I think there's a point in there that I'd really like just to hold on to for a second, and that is around coming into conversations or interactions with others, whether that's before your coaching session or before recording a podcast, and carrying some trepidation perhaps and some concerns and all these different things that go around your brain. And I don't know about you, Richard, but I've definitely found myself stepping into many rooms in the past thinking, I don't know why I'm here. I feel like an imposter in this space. I'm surrounded by people who know a lot more than I do. What have I got to contribute? And recently I've been on a learning journey around coach development and shared that with a peer on the course. And they said, oh God, Tom, me too. I felt exactly the same. And it put me at ease straight away. And it's just such a humanizing thing to recognize that those moments of self-doubt are pretty normal. And if you're feeling them, others are too. I felt that before this conversation as well, because I don't want to ask a silly question and make myself look like a buffoon. But it's probably a really healthy thing that we experience that, but it's probably just as healthy to share that with some of the other people that you're around, because it could put everyone else at ease.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I find coaching one of the most relaxing things to do. I'm in a very happy place when I'm doing it. I feel comfortable and enjoy doing it, but equally the nerves change. It depends what you're doing, the context, what else is on your mind. When you turn up, you've had to rush, you're stressed about that, you haven't quite got the equipment ready, you're not setting up in time. So yeah, I agree. And imposter syndrome, yeah, definitely experience that.
I'm going to go totally off piste, right, with this question, pardon the pun, but like, coaching isn't the only thing anybody listening to this will do. They'll have, they're a human being, a person before a coach. And I've experienced this as well. You turn up to a coaching session, you're running a bit late, you're in a rush, you've not necessarily had as much time to be as ready as you'd like to be. What do you do to steady yourself, to be as present as you can be when you cross that line? And there is never really a beginning and an end to coaching, but when you step into that coaching moment.
A couple of things. Firstly, I just share, hey, everybody, I'm a bit stressed. I was rushing. I wanted to be here earlier and so on. But you've got practice time. We always start with some practice time. Give me just a few minutes to get my eyes in, is what I say. Give me a few minutes to get my eyes in. And normally that does it. It's just, right, I'm on task. I'm in the moment. I'm here now. All that's peripheral. That can wait. And I enjoy it so much that the stress goes away. Yeah.
My relationship with time definitely changes while I coach. It definitely speeds up. Drawing us back to the conversation, and that being your addition to the game plan. And you mentioned cognitive behavioral coaching, NLP, appreciative inquiry. Would you mind, for anybody who isn't familiar with any of those, we don't need to go through all three, but is there one you'd almost pick out to say, well, coaches could give this a go, or at least go and explore it some more?
I'd say appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is for me, this isn't a textbook definition, this is how I perceive it and use it, is about listening hard, checking understanding, and asking questions that build on the answer you've just been given and gaining clarity. And this is something that I work on with my skiers. If I hit a fresh skier with this approach, sometimes it's a bit kind of rabbit in the headlights. And we almost have to go on a journey of agreeing to have a go at this and learning to use this. But that's for me is what it's about. It's appreciating what that person is saying to you, what their perceptions are of what they've just done, and using that to frame and keep developing the conversation, drilling down, getting a greater acuity to that feedback or that expression of the feedback.
Would you go meta with the people that you're coaching to say we're going to use appreciative inquiry as a way to help us through the session, or does that depend?
I don't tend to, but if it appears problematic, then of course, why not step back and say, okay, this isn't going how I thought it might go. Tell me what's going on for you. And it normally, elicits something. Now I can't get my head around this. Oh, okay. Well, look, should we do it differently? And then outside of this, maybe have a discussion about the approach and learn to use it. So on the other hand, though, on other occasions, as someone that just doesn't want to stand still and I keep developing, I did some lovely CPD 2 or 3 years ago on flow. And I went to the group and I said, look, gang, I've just done this stuff. It's really, really interesting. Would you mind if I explore it and experiment with you whilst coaching you? And this is what flow is about. Here are some of the things I'd like to try. Let's see if we can get you nearer to a flow state where you are completely oblivious to everything else apart from safety considerations. And it worked a treat. And actually, we're up for that, Richard. Let's have a go.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I had some mentoring support a couple of years ago, and the person I was working with regularly would stop and say, let's have a conversation about the conversation. I sense this is we're going away from what you wanted to talk about. And I always found that really refreshing to be able to step back and out and just press pause for 30 seconds to make sure we're both on the same page. We can almost recontract.
Yeah.
And then get back into the conversation. So you said listening hard, checking understanding, and then building on the answers that come back. Well, really tangible, really clear. Thank you. So we've got the conversation as an addition into the game plan. So our third part of the conversation today is this game-changing advice. So again, we know that kind of having something tangible for coaches to leave with can be really helpful and gives people a lot of energy. And what we ask every guest to offer is some game-changing advice that a coach could either pick up and apply directly into their work. They might want to edit it depending on the context, or it might be something that maybe they don't agree, but they press pause and they reflect on and maybe come to in the future. What's your game-changing advice, Richard?
It's their world. It's my job to understand their world.
Would you go a little bit deeper for us?
Yeah, of course. As we've discussed so far in the conversation, everybody has a different perception of the situation that they're in. And as a coach, I could apply more instructional techniques and say, you should be feeling this, you should be experiencing that, you should be turning here, you should be doing this, you should be making this movement. Whereas in reality, whilst they're coming down that hillside, they're feeling things in their way. Their senses are telling them stuff. I can only watch at this point. And in the conversation at the end of the performance, I can get to learn what they made of it. Firstly, were they on tasks? Secondly, what were they paying attention to? Thirdly, what did they make of that information that they were paying attention to? And it's for me to get to learn what that means to them, to try and help them with optimal development. So it's their world. It's my job as the coach to understand it.
Just a thought. So my background is team sports, football, and I know a lot of the coaches listening to this have a football background. And sometimes, and I'm very guilty of this, coaches can get in the way for nothing but positive intent of trying to be helpful, right? But in snow sport, you're not there or able to connect or communicate with the athlete whilst they're coming down the piste. So how do you spend that time in a helpful way. And I'm thinking about how a team sport coach or a coach who's kind of actively involved and offering lots of energy throughout the session, what could they learn from almost the enforced silence that you have?
Well, you've got to use the information that's available to you. And a lot of that is sight and sound. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And also to calibrate that, this attention feedback loop is very useful. The skier sets off with an intention. I'm intending to do this. I'm intending to steer here, 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 and here. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to pay attention to an aspect of the performance. That might be, say, some sensory information through the sole of the foot. What do you notice in your foot when you're going round the curves, left side and right side? And having to stand and watch from several hundred meters away and them approaching you really gets you to be more attentive. There's the classic cycle safety video of the basketball players throwing balls at one another. Have you seen that one?
I don't know. I remember the one with the gorilla walking through.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So for those that are listening, if you go onto YouTube and have a look for the cycle safety video from the City of London, there's a great safety video where you count the number of catches that the team in one of the colours is throwing, and you're paying so much attention to that and trying to count the right number that you don't know something else that's going on in the video. And it's very, very enlightening. And once you've had that brought to your attention, you can notice it partially during the counting activity, but it draws your attention away from the counting activity. A lot of my time is spent watching and seeing, is the skier doing the task? Are they performing the task? Are they doing what was intended? And then how are the skis behaving in the snow? And are they behaving symmetrically? Are the right turns similar to the left turns? If not, why might that be? Will the skier perceive that when they come down? So it really does make you use your eyes better and gather those insights. In fact, coaching has taught me, I wish I'd got into coaching when I was a Cub Scout, because I failed my observer's badge. When they put all these objects out and you have to remember them, I just wasn't attentive enough. And now I go through these processes, I could probably remember a few more things that were put on the table that day.
I've just written down in front of me the art of noticing, which perhaps as coaches being able to just think about that, like, what am I noticing? And if I was to look somewhere else or stand somewhere else, or if I understood the intention of my athlete better, would my attention therefore change? But yeah, if not asking coaches to do less, but to certainly be more applied in different ways.
Only yesterday I was having a conversation with my guru, John, about the recent ski races and the greatest of all time, Michaela Schifrin, who is just skiing so brilliantly at the moment. And we were discussing what we were seeing. And, to my amazement, I'd seen some stuff. And he said, I remember you telling me last year you saw something going on with the left-footed turns. They're different to the right-footed turns. And you're right. It still comes there under stress. I can see it happening in the race this weekend. And it also reminds me of times when I'm working with coaching colleagues or tutoring colleagues, if we're assessing ski coaches, that we'll often see different things because we're paying attention to different things. So be open to that too, is actually say to another coach, right, I'm stood here. We're both stood here now. What they're intending to do that. What are you seeing? This is what I'm seeing. Oh, okay. They're different things. Maybe we can use that information to triage the activity and smarten it up.
I was working with a coach developer a few years ago, and the phrase they used was a good coach developer helps a coach know where to look but not what to think. And maybe there's a parity there from coaches watching the athletes that they're coaching and being guided around paying attention to different things. Richard, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a willing guest on the podcast, and I really hope that our paths will cross again soon.
It's been fun. Thank you very much. And I'll send you some Smarties.
Super. Thanks for listening to the Game Plan Coaching Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please follow the show and share it with a coach who might find it useful. I'd love to hear your feedback and any ideas you have for future guests. You can get in touch through the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and go well in your next coaching session.